So my topic is game-based learning, project-based learning, and this really came to me when I attended a tech conference last year with a group from LMS, and one of the many sessions that I attended was on game-based learning. And as soon as I left that session, she changed my world. Like, I made sure to go find her after to just like get more ideas from her, because that was like the one session that I really remember. So if I was ever going to do a PLC, for whatever reason, it was going to be on this. Plus it aligns with what I'm trying to do since I'm starting out early. So the big things that I want you to take away from this is to think of some of these things that you possibly can do in your room, or any ideas that could probably go beyond what I have, and kind of just start that thought process and the relationship between you and I, because even after this presentation is over, if you do want to create some sort of game or project, I would love to be the person that you we have that partnership that I kind of help you out, that I get you started. So any notes, ideas, questions, please make sure that you are doing those. Now, yes, this is mainly game-based, but I have just finished my master's degree, and my thesis capstone, my big research paper, was on project-based learning. So I went ahead and just combined those two, and throughout this presentation I have some research that is in my capstone that I have integrated in that I feel like really goes well with this. And a lot of us have our one big thing that we want to work on throughout our careers, whether that's classroom management, strategies, methods, moving up to leadership administration. Mine is not only growing in content, but also finding engaging ways to not only teach, but for my students to learn, because every single day I want my kids to take away something, or better yet, if we don't remember everything, that we just had fun, because I don't ever want to be the class that they dread going to because I'm teaching in a traditional format, or what we're doing is not exciting at all, therefore content retention is minimal. So a lot of my quotes, a lot of the research that I did find is, if you want authentic, engaging, meaningful experiences, then you kind of have to think outside the box and be creative. The traditional ways serve us no longer.
Games are great ways to assess student learning in action. They can help you figure out what your students know and how they think. Any kind of game has the power to make student thinking and doing visible, not just digital games.
Go to here. Well, you can change it.
Choices that students make during gameplay provide lots of data about what they do and don't understand, and how they apply skills like critical thinking and problem solving. Games also provide immediate feedback to students about their choices, so they can take control of their own learning. This frees you up to evaluate more than just content knowledge and skills for a deeper understanding of what students are learning. And the best part about using games as assessments is that sometimes students have so much fun playing a game, they don't even realize they're being assessed.
3, 2, 1, go!
So, how do you assess student learning using a game? Step 1. Produce a product. Students can create something during gameplay to show what they are learning. For example, the goal of a card game might be for students to write a collaborative story based around the cards they are dealt. Step 2. Question students. You can develop a list of probing questions to ask students during gameplay. As students play, move around the classroom and ask those questions. Step 3. Track moves. Ask students to track the moves they make during gameplay. At the end of the game, you can evaluate the choices they made while playing. Step 1. Mod a game. Modding a game means changing one or two things about a game. For example, you can ask students to change one rule and then explain how that impacts what they are learning in the game. Step 2. Design a game. Ask students to design their own games to reach the same learning goal. Then students can play each other's games, give feedback, and review content and skills. Step 3. Write a strategy guide. After playing a game, students can use what they learn to write their own strategy guides to help new players learn how to win. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more video tips from Institute of Play.
So, how do we use this? Now, there are a lot of people who want to try to fit in a game in every little unit, every little lesson, and eventually you become overwhelmed. So what I would like you to do, whether it's in your head or on a piece of paper, think of that one thing that you dread covering, getting to. The students haven't liked it year after year. You don't like it because you don't like the content yourself, or that particular thing, or you dread teaching it, or what you have found online you don't like, and you don't. Whatever that one thing is, because we at least have more than one, but whatever that one thing is, we're going to kind of build a game plan about fixing that one thing and turning it into something that not only the kids will enjoy learning, but that you will enjoy teaching. What about it makes it boring? Again, do you really just like covering it, but you have to because it's in your standards and you have to fit it in because you know that it'll be on the test? Or is the fact that you have all this fun stuff that goes with it, but it doesn't really matter because there's a disconnect between your love of that content and the kids' reciprocation of said content? And then also be thinking about if you are a game-minded person, whether it's a game night or it's things that you play on your phone, whatever the mode type of game is, what are some kind of things that games that you really like that you wish to incorporate? Me, for instance, my favorite game in the whole entire world is Clue. I am a murder mystery fiend, love the movie. So one of my big things when I did start to actually work on this, I wanted to be sure that I incorporated some sort of murder mystery into my curriculum wherever it could fit. So in the next slide, I'm going to kind of go through my thought process, and if you would like to share yours, please feel free to do so. So, I am a nerd. I have loved language arts for as long as I can remember. I love my English classes, my college classes, and I keep going back to school, so obviously I love some form about that. But there is one thing that I have never really liked and never have been able to get on the first try, and that kills me, is grammar. Like, I can think of like a grammar class at Dalton State that we had to attend at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's the only time they offered it, and 8 a.m. Oh my goodness. And she took it, and she counted attendance, so you better be there. And she also gave homework that she checked at the beginning, so she was very old school. So with grammar, I can really spin almost anything. I can spin poetry, I can spin informational, I can spin argumentative, we can spin short story. There's so much to do. But the one thing that usually changes throughout our standards is the grammar aspect. Every year we have to cover or review something different. Now, with that being said, since that's kind of the one thing that I really do not like teaching, every single year I try to do something different. So, for the past 2 years I taught 8th grade, and our big grammar thing are verbs, everything about verbs. So last year when I was doing this, and I have it in a later slide, I decided to make a treasure hunt type thing with the verbs. So of course I did all the reviewing that we had to do, and then my very final thing before we moved on to test prep was this big game-based thing that I did, reviewing all types of whatever. So this year, since I am now a grade lower, we are focusing on other grammar aspects. So instead of just repeating the same thing, I want to challenge myself to do something else. So Davis and I have had this very early discussion when I showed her all of my stuff, that what we think would be kind of cool is, since we are having to do with a lot of sentences and sentence types and all these little things that go in a sentence, we are going to create a live action board game. And when I say that, my whole idea for this live action board game is not them physically playing one, but I make the room the board game. As you will come to find out, I love a theme. I'm a very thematic, dramatic person, so room transformations are my thing. So what I literally was thinking about, making the floor the game board, and winding it around as it does in the board game, having things up, and then making it a component where the kids are the game pieces. So it's another component of kinesthetic, up around the room, learning, having fun, instead of just it being on the board. But I do a little bit above. I just, again, can't help myself. I like to go above and beyond. So again, just taking that one thing and transforming it into something that not only the kids will enjoy learning, but that you will enjoy doing. Because if we're having fun, that also helps. So in this section, I'm just going to kind of break a before, during, and after gameplay. It's very similar to how we have to do instruction anyway, but with games comes a new beast. Because if you want the kids to be authentically learning and engaging, it's not going to be a situation where they're sitting and playing the game exactly how you want them to play it. They're talking, they're discussing, they're quiet, they're having fun. It's not going to be that type of situation. If anything, it's going to take their energy and amp it up even more. So then it's going to become a behavior management kind of thing. So it's a hand in hand. If you want to do this, well then this is going to be the drawback that you're going to have to work on. So, like before, whenever you want to do a game, you have to have some sort of purpose for doing a game. Now, unless it's the end of the year and you just want the kids to play a game and just meet with each other before summer, that's a different thing. But you have to be purposeful and game-based because you're still requiring the students to learn something. It's not just, playing Uno for an hour. Like, they have to be doing something with whatever game that you are using. So again, with authentic and engaging experiences, content retention is a big thing. If they're having fun while they're learning, they're going to tend to remember it more as if they're just sitting and just staring at the clock, because I did that. What's your mode? So I kind of like to do a little bit of both, but I typically err on the side of we are going to do the game ourselves. Now, I don't mind a virtual game, but everything works for different people. So some people want to keep it virtual, some people want to do it with the kids, some people want to do this big grand thing, or they just want to keep it on the Chromebook screen. It's completely up to you what you want to do. But again, what works best for you, and as we'll get here in a second, how much time do you have? Don't devote so much to something and then you're going to not have enough time to incorporate it, because especially if you're starting from scratch, it's going to be an overtaking that you want to be able to work out. Now, a big misconception with game-based is that you have to create everything from scratch. We don't have the time to create everything from scratch because there are so many other things that we have to do. And there is also conversation in the game-based world where if you are borrowing from someone or taking a template and then making it your own, that you're stealing, it's not authentic. No, work smarter, not harder. Now, if you have the time to build something from scratch, and I try to at least every single year build one thing from scratch, and that typically is my grammar thing, because that's what I'm devoting most time to. But everything else, if I can borrow something from somebody, I have done that, and I give it right back when I'm done. If I find a template that I can work off of and make it, it's not completely from scratch, but it's mostly from your own idea. I just have to go on a website and build this thing. And then, of course, if you have the budget and you want to buy parts of it, buy some of it, buy most of it, everyone's situation is different. Again, we'll talk about budget as well. But again, your game-based is so individualized because not everyone is going to want to do the same thing. In math, they want to maybe stick with card games, whereas in science, they might find a better brand in virtual because it's less cleanup, especially if it's something with experiments. So again, it's very individualized based on what the teacher wants to put in their classroom and how much time they want to devote. Of course, when you decide on a content learning objective, then what are you looking for? Are you looking for them to get the big picture? Are you looking for them to get one specific thing? Are you going to build a rubric? Are you going to have a list? Are you going to have expectations? What's the point of the game? Okay, so my point would be how much of all that we've taught can you have? And of course, I give support still. I don't just throw them out on an island by themselves. But if it's at the very end, of course, you're going to cover as much as you can. But if you're only doing one small thing, then that kind of will depict how big or small that your game will be. And depending on what type of game, you can assign roles. But again, it's all based on the game that you pick, based on your content. Now, this is where the classroom management, behavior management really comes into play. So, a big thing is time management. And I'll touch back into that in a second. But the whole point of game-based is that you are not having to do all the work. Yes, if you build it from scratch, you put in a lot of effort at the beginning, but during the game's not for you, it's for them. You've made it for them. So they need to have as much time with the game and as much active experiences with the game, either individually, partnering, group work, it just depends on the game. So being a facilitator, not a firefighter, means if you can walk around and facilitate, answer questions, make sure everyone is participating, make sure they understand the rules of the game after you go over it with the whole group, just making sure the train is still on the tracks. Now what happens is if the firefighter aspects comes, as teachers, we are putting out fires every single day. Now with game-based, depending on the class, because that's also a big component, if you're realizing that during the game this is not working and there's so many fires to put out, that will lead me into another point of what you're going to have to do to redirect. Because again, we would all love just a simple class to go, all nice and neat, and we can just move on. It's not going to happen. So we have to be realistic with game-based. I love to jump in with my kids and do it, but of course, if it's just me, I have to kind of do both. I have to be walking around, eyeing everybody like a lighthouse, making sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to. And then, if the room is going good and we have a good momentum, I will then sit and try to interact and play with the kids. Because again, that's just another level of caring about them, loving on them, showing them that you care. So it's just a lot of things in one. There are a couple of examples that I will show you that I had a really great idea and I was so excited, but as soon as I opened my mouth, it was a horrible day. The kids didn't want to do it, and as soon as they didn't want to do it, I took it personally. I'm like, oh my, well, 8 o'clock in the morning and nobody wants to do it, so what are we going to do instead? Like, we're going to do this. Like, we're not going to go back, okay? Because I really want y'all to see that eventually this is going to be a good thing for you, and eventually it is, but every single day it's not going to be like that. So whether you have to change one small part of your game or if you have to completely overhaul it as a last resort, again, everything that's going to happen in that instance is going to happen in the moment. I have some really funny stories coming up. So with the whole redirect, we did, at the very beginning of the year, we did an irony game, an irony man competition. So it was like we were reviewing the 3 parts of irony, but it was in the form of a board game. And that was also my first observation this year. But what happened in one of the classes was either a kid wasn't listening and they didn't understand the instructions, and they were trying to ask their person at their table who was annoyed that they were not paying attention, so they didn't want to help them. And so I have 2 people playing the game, and other 2 people are just staring and rolling their eyes and trying to get out their phones. So luckily, everybody else was engaged, and I could go over to this group, have those conversations, redirect, because again, I repeat myself more than I ever thought possible, and I will continue to repeat myself because that's just this day and age, and that's fine. I love the sound of my own voice, so it works just fine. Review and refocus. Again, I've had to literally some days stop the whole entire room because it's getting out of hand. We're like trying to break away from our groups. We're trying to bother somebody else. Some kids are trying to sneak out. Some kids are doing this. And I literally have to stop the whole entire room, refocus us, and get us back on track. So again, we would all love it to be a nice little hour where we could just mingle and move around and do our things, but that's not always the case. And of course, with this whole entire thing, if you take nothing away from this, pick something that you will have fun with and your kids will have fun with. Because again, it makes it so much easier to be in a room, and for most of these kids, where they feel like they are required to be, where they don't want to be, then it's our job to get creative and think outside the box and make fun things. And it's very cliche of me to say this, but like, have a kid look forward to what you're going to do. And that's kind of what I try to do, especially in these years where it's make or break. Some of my kids have already decided if they're going to drop out or not, and we've already had those conversations. So I just have a lot of things fueling me and to try to keep their engagement as long as possible, because I don't know what their future teachers will do, especially in the high school. And then after the game, how are you going to determine a winner, a loser? Or is it just going to be where we're going to play for an amount of time and we're just going to come back together and do a closing and review, and we're going to call on everybody and see what they learned? If it's some kind of writing component, are we going to check their notebooks? Again, it all depends on the game. So a lot of this is overview. And so if you do decide to do a game-based before the end of this year, we can kind of go back to these slides and do the specifics and nail down what every single aspect wants it to be. Because if I know anything about myself, I overplan and I overstress. And I will be thinking about a game the night before and making sure that in my head I've gone through every single scenario of what could happen, and that I stress myself out. So I make sure that I provide so much so at the very beginning, especially in my instruction, so there's little questions and we can have more time for learning. Finishing early, running late, same thing. If this game is not as long as you thought it would be and you have 20 minutes left, what are you going to do? Are you going to have them replay it? Are you going to do some sort of closing exit ticket type strategy? Are you going to have an additional supplement to that game? Or did you bank on this game taking the whole entire time, and so you're just sitting at each other for the last 20 minutes because the game wasn't as long as you thought that it would be? So just thinking about, plan for more. Always plan for more. Running late, there have been some instances where we may get a late start because there's a situation in the bathroom, or we were having a hard time during transitions, or whatever the case may be. So if you realize if you're looking at the clock, you're running late, how will you cut it? Where will you cut it at? Will you shorten the length? Will you get rid of a component? Because every class is going to play it differently. That's just what I've seen. You're not going to be able to do the exact same type of thing in every single class, because every single class has different needs, different constraints. So be prepared to be flexible at all possible. And then lastly, will you assess this? Will you evaluate it? Was it just something just to have the kids do one more review before you have to move on to the next thing? Or do you really want this to be some sort of test grade that actually will count, no matter how many times you would like it to count? Is it going to be feedback? So sometimes I may give them an exit ticket that I grade, or sometimes I will send them a survey that they will see throughout the rest of their life, especially if they go into higher education. I will send them a survey and ask their point of view. Because if I make a game, I want to use it for as long as possible. I don't just want to use it in 1 year and never use it again. So with my assessments, more often than not, they're surveys. What did you like about the game? What was confusing? What was easy to navigate? Would you change anything? Just kind of asking those open-ended questions. So if I have to go back before the next group and change something, because I want the game to constantly evolve to be better and better for the groups to come. So again, just how will you assess? And this is just basically saying how students need more accountability and responsibility for their learning. And with game-based, project-based, we as the teacher give so much to the kids that there really is no excuse. So with project-based, it's a lot of student choice. I need you to learn this one thing, but I don't really like to give tests. I'm more of a project-based educator. I tell my kids that every single year. So in lieu of a test, we do some form of a project. And that project is either a learning menu, choice board, tic-tac-toe. I fell in love with those at school. So if I'm asking them to if I'm asking them to memorize short story vocabulary, instead of doing a test, they could make a presentation. They could do something, they could physically make something. They could write something. They could build something. Very much, kids learn in different ways. I'm not a good test taker, and I made sure that I never would have to put another version of me in my classroom to that ever again, unless they ultimately had to. But everyone does things differently. So again, with project-based and game-based, even though you may pick one game, there could be millions of ways to do it. So, one of the things that, one of the very first things that I got and I loved when I saw pictures of Kelsey's Poe game, I was so blown away. I said, wow, I'm in competition with her. She is so good, so good. But whereas Kelsey's is more moving around the room and more objects and more in the room type stuff, mine is more virtual. Now, yes, there are some components that I do have up around the room just to get them moving, but a lot of what they're doing and what they're recording is online because, again, I tend to run out of copies and we just have to move around and make changes. So this is my very first year back in 2020 and 2021. So back then, the previous media specialist, she did a type in the yearbook. If you wanted your lesson to be put in the yearbook, she had a sign-up sheet. And of course, I was brand new. Sure, why not? Put me in the yearbook. And this was the very first year that I did this, and it's more of an online component, so very similar to what you think it is when you hear the title. And this week is coming up, starting next week, is one of Edgar Allan Poe's characters murdered him during a party, very similar to Clue. And this game is a week-long game. There are 5 chapters, a chapter a day, and there's artifacts that go with it, and there's a detective notebook they have to write in, and all this stuff. And the game takes literally the whole entire time, every single day, so it's a big block of time. So that's coming up in 2 weeks. Next week, I read every single day, we read one of Poe's works, and those characters are a part of the game. So they're going into the game having some background knowledge of the characters. So that's starting, and I call it my 2-week Poe takeover, and so that's starting on Monday. So it's a big undertaking because with poetry, and I'm really seeing this a lot, this group of kids, and this is your 8th graders, this will be good news for you, this group of kids really can write, they really have thoughts, they have ideas. It's just pulling it out of them sometimes and putting it on the paper, which is not so rare as we think it is. But what I'm really trying to do is with this component, especially there's a big writing component. And with murder mysteries, if I get a kid that loves a murder mystery, they automatically get authentically engaged, because even before we start this, I show a video, Poe talks to them, gets them set up, I review everything, and then they literally, for most of the class, I have a timer, and it's free play. Because there's different ways to play this, but I do free play because they can do it individually. They walk around the room, they interview suspects, like it's literal. I try to make it as authentically possible as what they've seen in movies and what happens in real life. So this is a crown jewel of mine that I have nurtured and I would like to use until I croak. So that's why I make sure that I always keep it. And so this is just a little write-up that they did 2 years ago that I've kept just to make sure that I have on the presentation. This is just some pictures of that, and yeah, I'm really excited to do it with this group because I have more kids this year, so a lot more opportunities to have fun. This was the treasure hunt from last year. So last year we had to do all about verbs. So action, linking, and helping, the 3 different types of verbals, active and passive voice, all that jazz. So 2 weeks before, I'm teaching everything, doing my individual activities, all the little things that I do. And then this was on a Friday. And at LMS, they have one lab at the other end of the building. It's not like every class has their own supply. So all the science teachers have a regular classroom, and they all have to take slots and all, like sign for appointments for the lab. So since at LMS I was sharing my room, I had to borrow the lab, and so I asked to have the lab for a week so I could every single day during my planning up until Friday, I could put up a new aspect of said game. So really what this had the kids do is right here at the very top, I gave them the word, definition, and example. And so this was very helpful. I caught them constantly peeking back and glancing, so I'm glad that I did it. Table decorations, stuff that I've bought, and stuff that I've borrowed. So again, what do you have the budget for? So some of this stuff I have in my room in a box, and some of this stuff was from a teacher who graciously let me have it. So again, room transformation did as much as I could, and really making a different part of the school feel like an actual treasure hunt. So the whole idea was we were all on a ship together, it was shipwrecked, and they have to go answer the questions on this island in order for us to get out. So of course it's still a work in progress. And this was an example of a game that was finished way too early. So the next time I do it, I'm gonna have to add on another component. So I was just thinking about, maybe let's do something with water. There could be a creature in the water that might have them do something, okay? So again, I'm trying to authentically engage them, because who knows if they're gonna get the level of this now, because they're at that high. Who knows if they're gonna get this level again? Like, I don't ever wanna rob them of a possible experience, because I don't know what it's gonna be like once they leave me. This is something that I did this year. Since I'm in 7th grade, I could finally read the short story 7th Grade by Gary Soto. And we were doing the plot pyramid at the time, so I found something online that I liked that was already kind of done for me in a way. So that would be the pictures. I put them in the pyramid style, connected them, put them on boards, and then the kids took the story and had to fill out all the parts. So the support here is, it's not just a blank document. They had questions they had to answer, quotes they had to find, things of that nature. And then I took it a step further, and what my resource did not include, I added vocabulary words on the sides, and the kids then had to go back and do more. So all in all, this is not necessarily a game, but this is more along the lines of a project. So instead of giving them a test over 7th grade, they could do this. And the only problem that I had with this is that the kids who don't want to do anything, still don't do it. I mean, sometimes that's sometimes the battle that you cannot fight. Chasing Lincoln's Killer by James L. Swanson is a book that I have done now for 3 years, and I have loved it ever since I've done it, and it ties great with my informational unit. And the very first thing that I did this year was I did a book tasting. This was modeled after my colleague at LMS, because she has her own rendition, so I took her little idea and I tried to blow it up as big as I could for my kids. So, just like what a book tasting usually is, the day before we read the book, I introduce it, I have a presentation, and because of our wonderful Canva presentations by Carter and Stafford, I was able to go on Canva and build a menu and I'm losing the word, but I was able to build a menu and other supporting documents that were at the table. So the menus are here. I built signs, and I built signs off of Canva, and I put them up in the room and outside of the room. And of course, since it was a book tasting, what I do is it's like the one time a year that I reach out to parents on Dojo and I'm like, hey, we're gonna do this big idea. I don't really like to ask parents for money because I completely understand. This is like the one time that if you're able to donate, whether you want to Venmo me money to go get the food or if you want to have food, and then that way the kids can have food because we know that we can't buy it for everybody. So I guess another example of me trying to outreach to parents. And I believe it went over well. The only problem is the kids tore these tablecloths up. I could not save them. Holes here, holes there, there was a stain there. I said, well, I expected stains, but it's my fault. I bought the cheap ones because, again, we're teachers. But, again, holes there. I'm just going to buy new tablecloths. But I kept everything else, so it was good. It was good. I have always wanted to do one of these, and I don't really think that it's only specific to ELA because it doesn't need to be a character autopsy. It can be a blank autopsy, whatever you want it to be. So, near the end of Chasing Lincoln's Killer, one of our characters was critically ill and eventually died. So, please ignore this horrible body that I had my little kid on the ground, and I traced him so I could do it. They're awful. Oh my gosh, they're awful. But I'm not going to redo it. So very simple, had operating signs up. Here was the body. I put task cards on the parts of the body with questions that I wanted them to answer. Here they had a patient chart, so every single task card had a corresponding chart. They had to write their answers in. I had guidelines for writing their answers, signs, and stuff like that. So again, just another way to take the book and make it come alive. And again, if you're not an ELA teacher, take what you're reading and make it come alive, or take what you're learning and make it come alive, because there's a little bit of history and storytelling in every one of our contents, and if you have storytelling, then you can build that up to something new. Now for the extracurriculars, what I went ahead and did for them is I went ahead and linked, and so this is a mix of LMS connections and RMS connections. I went ahead and provided them links of websites that I went and found to make sure they were quality websites that they could look at. So this was more for them. What I have done for my contents is my contents have gotten you've all gotten one slide. And the slide is just ideas that I have seen, that I have done myself, that I have watched, that I've observed, that I've seen on TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff that I just have really caught my eye, and I have one for each. Now, of course, please don't be upset with me. The ELA does have the most because that's where I am. But I did make sure to, if I did not know something, I went and researched some game ideas. So although you don't have links, we have more opportunity to be with each other because we're so close in, our realm of the woods that we can actually sit and build something, whereas the connections, I never get to see them. So at least I gave them some kind of jumping off point. So with ELA, a lot of this stuff is basically what we have known about. There's some new stuff there. Again, one of my highlights here would have to be, I'm a very big fan of the scavenger hunts. I try to include those as many times as I can. And then the story walks is a new thing that I had learned about, where you take in my experience, you take a children's book and you take out all the pages and you put each page on a singular thing, whether it's a gallery walk around the room or one school, put it in stakes and put it outside. So I brought the kids outside and they had to read each page of the story and do an activity with it. So I thought that was very significant. I'm awful at math, so this was really hard for me. But one of the ones that I really wanted to highlight here was the very top, hello, my name is. So what this math teacher did is she took vocabulary terms and she wrote the vocabulary terms on a hello, my name is card. And the kids had to introduce themselves as that vocabulary word, and they had to know the definition, how to use it in this problem. They had to know everything about that vocabulary word. So it was a nice little get up and go around the room, nice to meet you, but it was also up here, while they're moving around, they're also having memorized vocabulary. And not only were they responsible for knowing theirs, they had to listen to the other vocabulary words speaking, and you had to go around and meet everybody. And there was a component where you had to write something down if you would remember, but that was just a nice little vocabulary type thing. And also, if anyone knows my mother, I call her and be like, hey, what math stuff did you do? Because I'm really struggling on this slide. So she kind of helped me pick some stuff out before I finish this. Science, because I know that every single grade level is a different content in and of itself. You don't always do the same thing. What I have done is I've color coded. 6th grade is yellow, 7th grade is blue, and 8th grade is green. So it kind of goes with your, and really also me looking at your standards to make sure that I'm getting the correct topics. So basically this is all about earth, and this is life science, and this is everything with physical science and all that stuff, making sure that I have something for each. One of the things I did, actually 2 things I wanted to highlight was the butterfly camouflage. We did that when I was here because I had Ramona McKinney as my science teacher. She did this, and then Lofton is still doing this, where the kids learn about camouflage. They take a butterfly, a cutout butterfly, and they have to camouflage it around the room, and they have to make it match whatever it's on. And then a teacher would be the hunter and go around the room, and they would have to hunt for as many butterflies as they could. So when I was here, Meg Sparks was our hunter, and not gonna lie, my butterfly never got found. So every year I have to like put that in there because I took a poster and I had to like make sure the lines matched. I mean, it was a really critical thinking type thing. And so I've asked Miss Lofton if I can be a hunter because that teacher came in there and just tore it all apart, and I want to tear it apart. So I'm really, when we get to that, I'm very excited to be a hunter when that comes up. And periodic table battleship. It's the periodic table, and it's the same rules as Battleship. It's just helping them learn all where everything is on that table. And this was done last year by a friend of mine, and because I found it for her, because it was just on TikTok one day. I don't know how I got on science TikTok, but I did. And I saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh, Tina, you have to do this. So, and then last but not least is social studies. So again, with social studies, I looked at your standards, and your standards are broken up, I guess, on different type of understandings, so geography, government and economy, and historical understandings. So again, these are just also mixed in with each other. They can really be done with anything, any grade level. I just had to break it up differently to try to help you with your standards. One thing that I did want to highlight on this was the swatter game. What I saw is, especially if you're having to teach them where things are on a map, whether that's Georgia, around the world, the teacher would be on this side and the student would be on this side, and you would have a student being the host, and the host would read out either a state, a country, a city, or whatever, and the first one take a fly swatter and swat it, got the point. So it was just, instead of like you giving them a map with a fill in the blank and having to do like an assignment or a test, you have the kids up here, a teacher gets a fly swatter and a student gets a fly swatter. And really the funny thing about the game was, can a student beat the teacher identifying where that is before the teacher can? So kind of putting the teacher up here and like schooling the teacher and stuff like that. So I thought that was very, very cool. And everything else, I don't mind to explain in further detail. I just don't want to keep you any longer than I have to. And yeah, this is the last thing. So this is just other ideas. Like I told you, I'm big on room transformations. I love a theme because I would have loved a theme when I was here. Any old bag, I can explain that. Basically, kids bring in a bag of their own, whether it's a backpack, a family bag, and it's like a show and tell. They bring 3 things in that tells them about them. It's a good beginning of the year get to know you because I did it in college. And so I brought in, when I was a mascot here, I brought in my mascot bag, and then I brought in my name tag from the movie theater I worked in, a Funko Pop of a favorite character that I liked, and then a book that I love to read. So it's another way of getting to know you at the beginning of the year. Musical chairs. I would like to do that one day with writing and editing, having them move from chair to chair, but I don't know about that yet. And then of course choice boards and having students create either a textbook in their composition notebooks or having them create a portfolio online. So here are references, scholarly articles, but then here are 2 books. This one is currently in the library. I literally read it this past weekend because I just found it on happenstance, and so I read it and I put it back, so it's there. This is more of like the creative and examples of how these 2 people who work at the Ron Clark Academy have done game-based. And then this is a book that I used for my capstone with project-based, and every single chapter broke down another aspect. I feel like I've taken up all of your time. But this is something I'm very passionate about. And what I want to leave you with is, if you have an idea but don't know where to start, please use me. Now, Shrek is ending next weekend, so these 2 weeks, as soon as I leave here, we're at the high school working. But after that, please, I can meet before, after, during, whenever, and I would love to help you, either help you create a game, jumpstart a game, because again, this is something I'm very passionate about, and I try to do as many games as possible every year, so that way my curriculum doesn't get stagnant, especially when we teach the same things every single year until we have to change them. That's all I have. If you have any questions, please ask me, let me know. If you would like to run away screaming, you may, but thank you so much for being my first group this year. You are very nice to me. No one interrupted me, had to go to the bathroom, throw something at another student. I mean, this undivided attention I never get, so thank you.
Hey.